You know a story is about to detonate when it sounds less like gossip and more like a locked file, finally getting dragged into daylight. That's exactly the energy surrounding a new documentary tied to 50 Cent, a man who has never whispered when he could shout. This didn't feel like a casual release meant to entertain. It felt like a pressure valve cracking after years of silence. According to what's being discussed online, the film points toward an untold narrative involving a very young star and a very powerful industry figure. The moment Justin Bieber and Diddy were linked in the same conversation, the internet stiffened. Not because details were confirmed, but because the implications sounded heavy enough to demand attention. This wasn't framed as a neat expose with bows and credits. It felt unfinished, uncomfortable, and deliberate. What makes this hit harder is timing. Hollywood is already twitchy, public trust is thin, and audiences are re-examining old stories with new eyes. Drop a documentary into that environment, hint at long-buried connections, and suddenly every old clip feels different. People aren't asking what's proven yet, they're asking why this is being talked about now. And when a storyteller known for airing dirty laundry says something stayed hidden for years, the internet does what it always does. It leans in, it replays the past, and it waits for the next reveal. The moment chatter about the documentary surfaced, it didn't sound like a normal rollout. There were no glossy trailers promising inspiration or nostalgia. Instead, the conversation felt tense, like a sealed envelope sliding across a table with no return address. When 50 Cent is attached to anything labeled Untold, people don't expect a bedtime story. According to online discussion, the project hints at an industry narrative that stayed conveniently buried while everyone was too busy dancing to It wasn't marketed as a clean expose with bullet points and times. It felt like a suggestion, a nudge, a reminder that certain eras look different when you stop celebrating them. And the internet noticed immediately. What sent the temperature soaring was the way names began circling the conversation. Once Justin Bieber and Diddy were mentioned in the same breath, the mood shifted from curiosity to alarm. Not because anyone presented hard proof, but because the implication alone was heavy. The internet has learned that implication is often the opening act. To understand why this landed the way it did, you have to rewind to the era being quietly referenced. A teenage pop phenomenon launched into superstardom at a speed that made adults dizzy. Fame arrived fast, boundaries arrived late, and the industry applauded the chaos as long as the money kept printing. Looking back now, people are asking questions they didn't know how to ask then. The documentary chatter didn't accuse, it suggested. And suggestion is powerful because it invites memory to do the work. Old interviews resurfaced, not as evidence, but as atmosphere. Clips people once laughed at started feeling awkward when replayed without nostalgia goggles. The conversation quickly turned to power dynamics, not in a courtroom sense, but in a cultural one. Who had influence, who had access, and who benefited from silence? When those questions surface, discomfort follows. What made the discussion explode was timing. The entertainment industry is already being re-evaluated in public, piece by piece. Audiences are no longer satisfied with "that's just how it was." Drop a documentary hinting at long-hidden threads into that environment, and the reaction writes itself. People aren't asking for confirmation yet. They're asking why nobody talked sooner. Online reactions split instantly. Some dismissed the chatter as clout-driven noise designed to trend. Others argued that uncomfortable conversations always start as whispers before they become headlines. Both sides spoke loudly, neither side waited. The tone of the discussion wasn't celebratory. It was investigative. People weren't cheering, they were digging. Comment sections turned into amateur archives, pulling up timelines, interviews, and moments that once felt harmless. The past didn't change. The lens did. Sarcasm flooded the discourse, but it felt defensive. Jokes landed like nervous laughter at a family reunion where everyone knows something is wrong but nobody wants to say it first. Humor became armor, not entertainment. The project's perceived intent became part of the debate. Was this about accountability or about attention? Was it an attempt to force conversation or simply stir chaos? When motives are unclear, speculation fills the gap. What stood out was how little actual footage needed to be shown for the internet to spiral. The idea of something being hidden for years did most of the work. That phrase alone activated suspicion. In pop culture, secrecy implies guilt whether it's deserved or not. Industry defenders pushed back quickly. They reminded everyone that hindsight is powerful and often unfair. They argued that projecting modern standards onto past eras can distort reality. But critics countered that power imbalances aren't new. They were just ignored. The conversation stopped being about individuals and started being about systems. How young talent is protected or not. How fame accelerates adulthood before maturity can keep up. Those questions don't require a villain to be uncomfortable. Reaction channels tread carefully, choosing words like alleged, implied, and discussed. But caution didn't slow engagement. The audience was already hooked. Once curiosity turns into concern, it's hard to reverse. The most unsettling part was how normal this felt. Another re-examination of the past. Another reminder that the industry loves success stories and hates footnotes. The shock wasn't the conversation, it was how long it took to start. No official responses addressed specifics at this stage. Silence reigned, and silence online is never empty. It's interpreted, dissected, and weaponized depending on who's watching. Waiting became the loudest move as hours passed. The narrative solidified into a question rather than a claim. What exactly stayed hidden, and why is it being hinted at now? That question lingered without answer, which only made it louder. Mystery feeds momentum. By the end of this phase, nothing had been proven and nothing had been resolved. Yet the story had already shifted public perception. When people start rewatching the past with suspicion, reputations feel the tremor even without confirmation. This wasn't an expose moment. It was an awakening moment. And awakenings don't need proof to change how people feel. The documentary chatter didn't close a chapter, it cracked one open. And once a crack appears, everyone starts peeking through it. This wasn't the reveal, it was the setup, and setups are where the real tension begins. Once the conversation seeped into the algorithm, the internet didn't wait for footnotes. It did what it always does when mystery meets celebrity. It sprinted. Timelines turned into open tabs, comment sections into debate clubs, and reaction videos into pop-up courtrooms. Everyone had a take, and every take arrived fully formed. TikTok went full archivist mode. Old interviews were clipped, slowed, and stitched with ominous music like they were foreshadowing scenes from a true crime series. Pauses were analyzed, smiles were questioned, and jokes from a different decade were replayed with today's discomfort layered on top. When nostalgia gets re-edited, the tone changes fast. Memes exploded, but the laughter sounded cautious. This wasn't the usual Duncan celebs energy. It was nervous humor trying to process unease. Jokes came wrapped in disclaimers, like comedians whispering allegedly before the punchline. Comedy became a pressure valve. The moment Justin Bieber was pulled into the broader conversation, the temperature arose, not because anyone presented new facts, but because the internet collectively revisited what it means to grow up famous at warp speed. Childhood, fame, and access don't mix cleanly, and everyone knows it. The discussion shifted from what happened to what should have happened. Then the gravity multiplied when Diddy entered the same narrative orbit. Power changes how speculation feels, even when details are thin. Influence adds weight to questions without answering them. The internet doesn't need confirmation to feel concern when power dynamics are mentioned. Hovering over it all was 50 Cent, whose reputation for bluntness fueled the fire. People argued about intent as much as content. Was this a provocation designed to force conversation, or a strategic stir for attention? When motives are unclear, audiences fill in the blanks loudly. Celebrity reactions arrived in coded language. No names were named, but phrases about protecting young talent, industry accountability, and context matters popped up like synchronized swimmers. Hollywood rarely confronts storms head-on. It prefers umbrella statements and carefully timed silence. Those silences were read like tea leaves. Influencers hesitated on camera. You could hear the brakes squeal mid-sentence as creators weighed clicks against caution. Disclaimers slid into captions, and comment pins tried to slow dog piles that were already running downhill. When content creators pause, it's because the room feels different. The absence of specifics became its own storyline. No new clips surfaced, no receipts dropped, no timelines were confirmed. Yet the conversation kept expanding because repetition does what evidence sometimes can't online. A question asked 1,000 times starts to feel like an answer. Media outlets tiptoed with careful phrasing. Discussion, re-examination, and online speculation filled headlines while avoiding claims. But careful language doesn't travel as far as implication. The headline gets shared, the nuance gets lost. The debate fractured into familiar camps. One side warned against retroactive judgment, arguing that projecting modern standards onto past eras can distort reality. The other side countered that power imbalances aren't new, they were simply tolerated longer. Both sides spoke with certainty, and certainty beat patience. Pop culture comparisons flew. People likened the moment to past industry reckonings where whispers preceded wider conversations. Others rolled their eyes, calling it another cycle of outrage without outcomes. Either way, the comparison machine kept the story alive. Reaction thumbnails grew darker and louder. Red arrows, shocked faces, and ominous fonts promised revelations that hadn't actually arrived. The content ecosystem fed on anticipation, not confirmation. Outrage monetized faster than restraint. What unsettled many viewers was how familiar the cycle felt. Another retrospective, another uncomfortable lens. Another moment where fans realized success stories have footnotes. The shock wasn't the questions being asked. It was how late they arrived. As hours turned into days, the conversation matured from shouting to watching. People stopped yelling and started observing responses, or the lack of them. Every pause felt strategic. Every non-statement felt intentional. Industry defenders emphasized due process and warned against mob mentality. Critics replied that cultural conversations aren't courtrooms, but they shape accountability. Both arguments collided without resolution. The stalemate fueled engagement. The internet's memory kicked in hard. Fans resurfaced moments once framed as harmless, now viewed with suspicion. Context shifted, not facts. When lenses change, meaning follows. Sarcasm threaded through the discourse like a coping mechanism. Of course, this stayed hidden. Jokes landed with a wince. Humor masked the anxiety of not knowing what's real while sensing something's off. It's easier to laugh than to sit with ambiguity. Creators tried to redirect toward broader themes, safeguarding minors, mentorship, ethics, and industry guardrails. Those conversations gained traction, even as names kept pulling focus back. The tension between systems and individuals refused to resolve. By the end of this phase, nothing concrete had landed, yet perception had already moved. Once audiences rewatch the past with a different lens, trust shifts whether it should or not. Feelings outran facts. This wasn't the peak, it was the squeeze. And squeezes force something out eventually. Because when a story survives without proof, it's not living on evidence, it's living on implication. When the noise finally lowered, the damage didn't disappear, it settled. Viral moments fade fast, but reputational ripples move slow and wide. The internet may scroll forward, but it never truly lets go. Once a story reframes the past, it changes how people remember it forever. For 50 Cent, the aftermath wasn't shock or surprise, it was calculation. He's long understood that saying less can sometimes say more, and hinting can move conversations faster than accusing. Whether intentional or not, the discussion landed exactly where it hurts most: public trust. The conversation stopped being about a documentary and became about credibility. People questioned why these narratives surface when they do. Was this accountability finally catching up? Or was it controversy chasing attention? Motive became the shadow hanging over every discussion. For Justin Bieber, the impact felt indirect but heavy. His name re-entered conversations about childhood fame, industry pressure, and how quickly success can swallow protection. Fans didn't accuse, they reflected. Reflection can be just as uncomfortable as accusation. Old footage resurfaced, not as evidence, but as emotional triggers. Moments once framed as funny or awkward now felt uneasy under a modern lens. Nothing changed in the clips themselves, only the audience did. And once the audience changes, the story follows. For Diddy, the effect was gravity, not explosion. Power doesn't get challenged loudly at first. It gets questioned quietly. Silence didn't calm the discussion, it sharpened it. In pop culture, unanswered questions linger longer than denials. Industry responses stayed measured and distant. No dramatic defenses, no emotional rebuttals, just careful positioning and minimal engagement. When silence becomes strategy, people notice. The broader consequence landed on the system itself. Conversations shifted toward how young talent is guided, protected, or left exposed. The industry loves success stories, but avoids post-mortem. This moment forced people to ask why. Creators pivoted from reactions to responsibility. Commentary slowed, tones softened, and disclaimers multiplied. Nobody wanted to be remembered as the voice that jumped too fast. Caution replaced clicks. Temporarily. What lingered was discomfort, not clarity. No proof emerged. No timeline was confirmed. Yet perception had already shifted, and perception doesn't wait for verification. Once people feel something is off, reassurance becomes harder than revelation. Fans began separating nostalgia from reality. The music still played, but the context felt heavier. Enjoyment came with footnotes. That's how cultural rewrites begin quietly, without announcements. This story didn't end with a verdict. It ended with a pause. Pauses are dangerous in celebrity culture because they invite imagination. Imagination fills gaps. Facts haven't reached yet. The internet moved on to the next distraction. But this conversation didn't disappear. It archived itself. Archived stories don't shout. They wait, and they resurface when timing feels right. The lesson here wasn't about guilt or innocence. It was about timing, power, and silence. About how long certain conversations stay buried because they're inconvenient, and about how quickly they erupt once cracks appear. No one walked away clean, not because anyone was proven wrong, but because trust shifted. Trust is fragile in entertainment, and once shaken, it doesn't snap back into place. It recalibrates. This wasn't a it was a re-examinations change how people remember everything that came before, because once the past is questioned publicly, it never goes back to being comfortable. It just becomes louder in hindsight. This wasn't the end of the story. It was the moment people stopped assuming the story had already been told. If this story made you stop scrolling and actually think, then it did its job. Real industry shakeups don't always come with court documents and press conferences. Sometimes they arrive as questions, silence, and uncomfortable memories resurfacing at the worst possible time. If you think this conversation matters, say it in the comments and explain why. Now, smash that like button like it's been hiding the truth from you for years. Subscribe like you're tired of celebrity coverage that pretends everything is fine once the cameras stop rolling. Turn on notifications, because stories like this don't come with trailers. They drop suddenly, and they always hit harder when nobody's ready. This channel doesn't hand out verdicts or protect legacies. We break down patterns, timing, and why certain stories stay buried until the moment they can't anymore. Fame doesn't erase questions, it delays them. And once those questions surface, They don't politely disappear. Drop your thoughts below and tell us what part of this story made you uncomfortable. Tell us whether the industry does enough to protect young talent, or if it only reacts once the damage is done. And tell us what conversation you think is next. Because you already know this isn't the last chapter. The past doesn't stay quiet forever. It waits, it ages, and it comes back when the spotlight shifts. And when the next untold story suddenly becomes unavoidable, you'll know exactly how the cycle works. This is Viral Trek, where the past catches up. The questions hit harder, and the truth never stays buried for long. Harder, and the truth never stays buried for long.